In the dusty town of Billings, Montana, where the Rocky Mountains loomed like silent guardians, lived a cowboy named Jake Harlan. Folks called him the Untouchable, one nobody dared lay a hand on. Not in a fight, not in friendship, not even in passing. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with piercing blue eyes that could stare down a raging bull, and a reputation that preceded him like a storm cloud. Jake rode into town 5 years ago, bought a rundown ranch on the outskirts, and kept to himself. He worked the land alone, herded cattle with a skill that made other ranchers envious, but he never joined the Friday night poker games at the saloon or danced with the ladies at the annual harvest fair. Emily Carter was new to Billings. She'd come from Chicago after her father's death, inheriting a small plot of land next to Jake's ranch. At 28, she was tired of city life, the noise, the crowds, the empty promises of suitors who cared more for her family's money than her heart. Montana promised freedom, wide open spaces, and a chance to start over as a horse trainer. She was strong-willed, with auburn hair that caught the sun and a laugh that turned heads. But the locals warned her about Jake from day one. "That Harlan fella? Steer clear, miss," old Tom at the general store said, shaking his head. "Ain't nobody touches him. Not since. Well, just don't." Rumors swirled like prairie wind. Some said he'd killed a man in Texas and was on the run. Others whispered he'd been in a gang that robbed trains, emerging as the sole survivor of a bloody shootout. A few claimed he was cursed, that bad luck followed anyone who got too close. But the strangest part was his shirts. Jake always wore them buttoned to the throat, even in the blistering summer heat when other cowboys stripped down to vests or went bare-chested. While branding cattle, he swam in the river fully clothed, changed in the barn with the doors locked, and bathed at dawn when no one was around. "Hide something fierce under there," the ranch hands muttered. "Something that'd make a grown man weep." Emily didn't heed the warnings. Her first encounter with Jake came when a storm scattered her horses onto his land. She rode out to retrieve them, finding him single-handedly rounding them up with his lasso. "Appreciate the help," she called, dismounting. He tipped his hat but said nothing, his face shadowed under the brim. Up close, she saw the lines etched around his eyes, the quiet strength in his movements. He was handsome in a rugged way, like the mountains themselves. Over the months, their paths crossed often. Shared fences needed mending, stray cattle wandered, and Emily's bold spirit drew her to his solitude. She'd bring pies to his doorstep or wave from afar. Jake was polite but distant, always keeping space between them. Yet she caught him watching her work the horses, a softness in his gaze that belied his reputation. One evening, after a brutal blizzard trapped them both in his barn while checking on a sick foal, conversation flowed. Emily shared stories of Chicago. Jake spoke little, but when he did, his voice was deep and warm, laced with a Texas drawl. "Why do they call you Untouchable?" she asked bluntly. He stiffened. "Old habits. Keeps trouble away." "And the shirts? You never take him off, even in this heat." His jaw tightened. "Some things are best left covered." But Emily was smitten. Jake was kind beneath the gruff exterior. He'd fixed her roof without asking, left firewood at her door during winter. When suitors came calling from town, Jake scared them off with a single glare. "He's dangerous," they'd say, fleeing. Finally, after a year, Jake proposed. It was sudden, under a starlit sky after a cattle drive. "Marry me, Emily. I ain't much for words, but I need you." She said yes, heart soaring. The wedding was simple, at the little church in Billings, with half the town attending out of curiosity. Whispers followed. Brave girl, marrying the Untouchable. Their life together was good. Jake was a devoted husband, tender in private, fierce in protection. They worked the ranch side by side, expanding it into something prosperous. Emily trained horses that fetched top dollar, and Jake's cattle thrived. Nights were passionate, but always in the dark. He'd blow out the lantern before undressing, slipping under the covers fully clothed until the last moment, then pulling her close without ever letting her see. "Why?" she asked one night, tracing his arms in the moonlight. "What are you hiding?" "Not yet," he'd murmur. "Trust me." Curiosity gnawed at her. The townsfolk still speculated: burn scars from a fire, a brand from prison, bullet wounds from some outlaw past. It happened on a scorching July day 2 years into their marriage. Jake was out mending fences when a rattlesnake struck his horse. The animal bucked wildly, throwing him hard against a rock. Emily heard the commotion and ran, finding him unconscious, blood soaking his shirt. Jake, panic surged as she tore open his buttons to check for wounds. What she saw stole her breath. His torso was a map of horror deep, jagged scars crisscrossing his chest and back like whip marks. Old and faded but unmistakable. Burns puckered the skin in places, and what looked like knife wounds dotted his sides. But worst was the massive brand on his shoulder, a crude T for traitor. He stirred as she gasped, eyes fluttering open. Shame flooded his face. "Now you know," he whispered hoarsely. Emily helped him inside, cleaning the gash on his head. That night, as he recovered, he told her everything. Years ago, in Texas, Jake had been a Confederate soldier. Captured during the war, he'd been held in a Union prison camp. To survive, he escaped but not before being accused of betraying his comrades for leniency. It was a lie spread by a jealous officer, but the brand marked him forever. After the war, Southerners shunned him as a turncoat. Northerners saw him,